Life's a coat of many colors. It is never black and white. Can't have one without the other.
Hey guys, Josh here, and today we're going to be talking about the Sennheiser HD800S. But before we get into that, I have a real quick message from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is Soundrise Pro stands. These are all metal stands made in America. They come in 4 colors: metal, silver, black, and the new color, and my new favorite, matte white. They work by raising your speakers off your desk to deliver a more direct sound straight to your ear, reducing the unwanted reflections and vibrations of your desk surface. They also have a hole conveniently located for easy and simple cable management, allowing you to focus less on clutter and cables and more on what matters, the music. So if you want to check out stands that I personally use, go check them out at soundrisepro.com. So the HD800S. This is a headphone that I've actually struggled to figure out how to review. And I've had it for a while, and it was sent in by a viewer of the show, Nima. So everybody send a huge thank you to Nima. And a personal thank you from me, Nima. This is a absolutely fascinating headphone to me. And before I talk about this, I want to kind of address the 800-pound gorilla. Actually, there's 2 800-pound gorillas. I reviewed the HD800, the standard one, a while ago. Didn't like it. I think the cons of that headphone far outweighed the benefits of it. And they seem to have fixed a lot of the problems that I had, or at least slightly corrected a lot of the problems I had with the standard 800 in the 800S. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the Super DuPont mod. A lot of you are aware of that mod for the HD800, which essentially kind of turns it into this. And the Super DuPont mod is supposed to kind of bring that headphone kind of up to spec with what this does. And, this is kind of like a $600 extra version of that modification with a slightly different paint job. Now, you do get the added benefit of, not having to do the modifications yourself, so you don't risk either breaking your headphone or going out of warranty if the headphone itself breaks some other time. You can send it into Sennheiser with no worries there. But I do kind of have to shake my finger at Sennheiser for charging $600 for what otherwise should be a pretty cheap and simple modification. And of course, the slightly different plastic color. That's up to you guys to decide whether or not that's going to be worth it to you. Okay, so a little bit of personal stuff on this headphone. The issues for me of the standard 800 were that it was too bright. It was pretty sibilant, and there was like some ringing issues. I think it's either at like 5 or 10K. I can't remember which one, but there were some ringing issues that were basically resonance within the cup. And the bass was a little too dry for me to like. And that basically didn't amount to a very enjoyable listening experience. And they've slightly corrected a lot of those issues. They got rid of the volume scaling issue. And that issue was when you increase the volume, put more power into it, the treble would basically shoot up in volume while the mid-range and the bass response came up a little bit, but not nearly as much as the treble. So the louder you listen, the brighter it was. This corrects that issue a little bit. So now everything kind of scales equally with more and more volume. So if you want to listen a little bit louder, you're not as punished as you were with the 800. They've also negated a big portion of the ringing issues that were on the standard 800, where it doesn't have these weird kind of resonances that you can really audibly hear. Some people it didn't seem to bug as much as others. I was more on the it definitely bugged me side. And then the bass response is a bit stronger. And for me, I like that. Some people call it distorted, but I actually really like the bass response and how it's done on this particular headphone as far as like the 800 sound goes. I really do like it on this headphone. So on a personal note for me, this has actually allowed me to enter kind of a honeymoon phase of the 800S while listening to it. I find this headphone, and I think one of the things that it is able to do better than most other headphones is make music absolutely fascinating. There is so much information that this headphone can offer above a lot of other headphones, even at $1,600. And for me, this was really only able to happen because the issues were maybe not completely resolved, but definitely at least course corrected a little bit. And lately I've been looking into like kind of a higher end headphone to purchase, and of the considerations was definitely the Aria. I really did like the Clear, also the LCX. And I'm actually adding the 800S to that equation. Now, I will have a comparison between this and the Hifi Aria coming out soon. And I feel like that is a very interesting comparison because these are both $1,600 and have very different sound signatures. And depending on what you like, you might prefer one or the other. And I'm going to kind of go more in depth into that comparison. And closing statements on this very long introduction, I'm sorry for that. This is a headphone that I've really I've really learned to respect, and I can appreciate what it's good at a lot more than I could the standard 800. So build and fit, not much has changed other than the color compared to the standard HD800. Actually, not really anything in terms of the build quality and fit. If you haven't held that headphone though, it's kind of odd. This is a very big looking headphone, but it actually fits relatively slimly on your head compared to some other bigger headphones in this price range, like the LCX. That's a very bulky, heavy headphone. So the build is primarily plastic, but it's pretty robust feeling plastic. Like it feels lightweight, but it's incredibly sturdy. And when you squeeze it, it doesn't creak or anything. Like I'm putting a bit of pressure on here and it doesn't really make any noise. Overall, even for a plastic headphone, this is a really good build of headphone, and it kind of just feels like it's floating on your head. Now, some people find this uncomfortable. I actually quite like it. I feel like you kind of learn to adapt to it, and you kind of get a little bit of like head burn in a sense, and it becomes a really good, comfortable headphone after you've worn it time and time again. You kind of learn what it's supposed to feel like, and there's not a lot of clamp force or anything, and it kind of just feels like it's just resting on your head rather than trying to grip your head. It feels quite nice. Now for something that actually increases comfort even further, but it is an additional $100. But if I were to buy this headphone, I would invest in it, not just for comfort though, but more for the sound quality that it offers. And that's the Dakoni Elite Hybrid for the HD800S. Now they are expensive pads. They're about $100, but I really like the sound signature. It makes everything a little bit warmer. It makes the bass brought up a little bit more. The mid-range seems to be fuller as well. And it reduces a little bit of the treble that this has because it's still pretty hot in the treble for me. And these pads and the mounting system are so well made that it actually looks like it could be the stock pad on here. It fits really well and better than most other pad fitments on other headphones. And like I said, if I were to buy it, I'd invest in this. If you have this, I would spend the extra $100 because the sound signature coming out of that is pretty nice. Okay, so this is a 300 ohm headphone, but it has a sound pressure level of 102 decibels per milliwatt. So it actually puts out a decent bit of volume without too much power, but the 300 ohms leaves this to be a pretty amp picky headphone still. Just about as amp picky as the HD800 standard was. So with this headphone, more than most, you're actually going to really benefit from higher quality, higher powered amps. Even if you don't need the total like amperage of it to drive this headphone, by volume, it really does seem to like the extra control that better amps seem to offer. So if you're investing the money in this, if you're coming from nothing and you don't have an amplifier, I highly recommend getting one. And if you have kind of a, maybe a crappy amplifier, I would definitely recommend upgrading to a bit nicer one. And that's because you will clearly see benefits and different changes based off of different amplifiers. Perhaps a little bit more legwork than some of you would appreciate, but if you have something like the THX789, that on this headphone is fantastic, especially if you're one of those like detail whores. The treble response is something I want to tackle first because for me, that was one of the most concerning features coming into this headphone was, all right, the treble response is crazy hot on the HD800 and you had the ringing, and the ringing was more of why the treble response was an issue for me. And they've corrected a lot of the ringing and brought down the treble response just a little bit. Now, it's still a headphone that I'm going to consider a little bit bright in the treble response for me. It's a little bit harsh, a little bit of a payment that you have to make listening to this headphone, especially for longer listening sessions, at least for more treble sensitive people like myself. Now, that being said, part of why I respect this headphone so much is because this is just a extraordinarily detailed and resolving headphone in the treble response. It has so much information up there. And yes, it's mostly due to the fact that, well, at least partially due. It's partially due to the fact that it is pushed quite hard towards you. It is definitely a little bit forced in the treble response, but without the driver capability of the 800, there's a lot of headphones that have forced highs, but they don't have the resolution to keep up. And the resolution of this is really what I respect. Now in the treble response, it also has a very clear distinction between different timbre characteristics of different instruments. I've said that for a few different headphones, but this headphone in particular stands out even at $1,600. It's very good for that. Now with the mid-range here, it's still not going to be a strong point of this headphone. It's not really a great selling point. I think the placement and the ability to have a vocalist in in whatever position the music is putting it in, and clearly having it there is one of the benefits of this. But there are some downsides to it. It leaves a lot of vocalists that really need to seem kind of powerful and more broad, seeming a bit thin. And for me, it has the speed, but it can't quite develop the body that I like to see from those vocalists and having the presentation of, feeling really big and bold. They kind of just get sucked into a more thin sounding headphone. Now I am being a little bit picky here, but you also are paying a premium for this headphone. It's $1,600. It's not cheap. Vocal texture and fluctuation and dynamics are all very good. And your female top end is incredibly clear, like above anything. It is just very, very clear. You've got this awesome level of separation. This is one of the best headphones for that separation. But again, a little bit thin. That's one thing that I wish was a little bit better. Now to kind of tack on to the treble response and also the mid-range and more of the vocal performance as a whole, S's on this headphone, while quite a bit better than the standard 800, they still, for me, are a little bit harsh and they can take me out of the music a little bit, and they are not always all that pleasing. Now, when it comes to further mid-range that is not vocals, acoustic instruments are something that this headphone is just, that's purely in its element. Like if you're listening to orchestral music or, even individual guitars or drums, the placement of everything. And that's part of what makes this headphone so fascinating, is the information in the room. And what's interesting for me is that I am more of a kind of a pleasure seeker when it comes to listening to headphones. I really like to listen to a headphone that I just purely enjoy. And then the analysis for the review is usually separated from that, but also kind of sprinkle in my opinions here and there for most of my reviews. But this headphone is so good that it's actually kind of taking me out of what I would normally go for just pure pleasure listening, and has more allowed me to kind of really enjoy seeking out all the little details of the music that I can't get from most other headphones. So I'll listen to something that I consider still to be an extremely detailed headphone, which is the Hifi Aria, but I just love listening to that headphone. I just love it. But this kind of takes the music and puts it in a completely different light. And one of the key things that I personally love about listening to different headphones is that it's like listening to music and looking at music through different lenses, right? You're getting a different view and a different perspective of the music. And I love that. I love exploring different headphones for that reason. One of the reasons why I love that so much is because, to me, it has such a different and unique sound. And this headphone has that same ability to have a different and unique sound from just about everything else. And because it's fixed a lot of the main issues and, not fixed, but corrected a lot of the main issues that I had with the 800 that was really stopping me, just about in everything that I listened to, it was stopping me from really getting into it. This headphone has allowed me to kind of embrace that aspect of it. Now, it's not always enjoyable, but that's part of the information in the song, is sometimes shit is just not recorded well, and it is punishing on this. But when it's recorded well, when you have a song that complements this nicely, it is just so perfect. It is quite amazing how great this can sound on the right tracks. So I'm going to call out some of those tracks here because they're just tracks that I freaking love it on this headphone. Chris Drone's Moonstruck album, Long After You're Gone, is one of the best interpretations of this song I've heard. I like that song with a little bit of a treble boost and from the headphone, like a little bit spicier treble than normal. And the bass response on that song is already pretty strong. So the slight lack of bass response, or the slight, suppression of bass response compared to the highs, it still ends up being a really enjoyable mix. Then you have Cicely McLaurin Salvant, Dreams and Daggers album, and the song that DMS he's another audio YouTuber. Definitely subscribe to his channel. I'll actually link it down below. You're Getting to Be a Habit with Me. That song on this headphone is fantastic. The sound staging and the quality of the music. Then you have Marina Love Plus Fear album. It is To Be Human. That song on this headphone is just absolutely just so good. A tile recommendation from Inner Fidelity, Popsicle Toes, from Diana Krall, When I Look Into Your Eyes. That is just gorgeous on this. The Music of the Night from Phantom of the Opera. That song sounds good on just about anything, but it sounds really good on this headphone. I I just love that. It's not the best recorded thing in the world, but it is just a super pleasing song. And then the Chieftains, the Long Black Veil album, The Foggy Dew. The sound staging ability, the presentation ability, the impact ability. Whew, it's so good. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for the song recommendations for the 800S. So sorry for that departure here, but let's go ahead and jump into the bass response, which is, I think it's better than some people give it credit for. It's not large in amount, but what it is really good for is maintaining one locatability. So a lot of headphones will have kind of a bass response that either seems separated from the music, which can be very enjoyable at times, or just this incredible wall of bass like you get with a lot of planars. This bass response, while not the deepest or the hardest hitting in the price range, the placement and location of everything is extremely clear. And I feel like that is a good mix with how the placement and everything else is with the rest of this headphone, and perhaps is one of the keys to this headphone's ability to soundstage and image so well and kind of lead the class there. Now, to complement the bass response, it is very resolving, very clean, and very clear. And some people I've actually heard call it distorted, and I wasn't getting massive amounts of distortion. And I think that really comes down to, and not to call anybody out or disagree with anybody, but in my findings, I only really got distorted bass when I put this on kind of low quality power. So things like the shit hell, the bass response didn't really seem as resolving and as clear as putting it on the THX 789 or even that HDV 820 amp back there, or even things like the Hifi IDSC Pro sounded amazing for the bass response. And the only reason why I say that is because I think if the bass distorted, anytime you would add EQ to the bass response, it would distort very quickly. But this holds up really well to different EQ for the bass response. And so it doesn't seem to be a driver or a headphone issue as much as a power delivery issue, at least in my experience. But your experience may be different. Now, as clear and well resolving as it is, it's the same story that you've heard 1,000 times before about the 800 line of headphones. It's not all that strong. It's not super impactful in the bass response. There's a little bit of punch there, but not really that much. The HD820 headphone, which I reviewed last week, that has more bass response, but it's looser. It doesn't really have the quality that this has. This has even less bass response than that. So it's pretty clean and a little bit dry in the bass, even though for other facets like quality and locatability and timbre characteristics all the way up to like 300 Hertz is really good. But it's one of those trade-offs that you're going to have to make and decide what you prefer from your headphones. Now, on a side note to imaging and soundstage, let's talk about gaming, because before the HD800 was kind of the best gaming headphone that I think you could buy for the money, and it's been upgraded for $600 more to the HD800S. If we're going for the totality of gaming performance and ability and locatability and how far they're coming, what exact degree they're coming from, how many walls they're behind, what kind of gun they're using, any bit of information you would want to know, as well as having a substantially immersive experience. And normally you'd have to kind of make a trade-off between immersion and actual performance. Not with this headphone. You get the best of everything for gaming for this headphone. And the added bass response while still not really sacrificing anything else and not having absolutely killer highs of the 800. Fully support this as the best gaming headphone that you can buy, period. Now, games this is tested on, everything from casual playing games like Skyrim, which isn't really that big for locatability, but the immersion is very nice, to more competitive games like Destiny 2, Apex Legends. I haven't really played Fortnite, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5. You put this headphone on and play those games and you have never heard anything like it. It is shockingly immersive. So I think that's going to be enough about that. So the conclusion of this headphone, and kind of where I place it, because there's a lot of different facets that go into this headphone. And at the end of the day, I do have to analyze whether or not the people who are buying it are going to be either excited or happy, or, how long that honeymoon period is going to last before you're kind of just like, okay, I need to look for something else. I got to admit, it's a little bit difficult to place this headphone because on one hand, there are very, very few headphones that can do what this headphone does. And the fact that it makes music be seen through kind of a lens or a light or, an auditory kind of experience that you don't really get anywhere else. And in a certain sense, that the premium price for it is kind of worth it in that sense. But that is completely separate from enjoyability and what individuals like me might like. I like a little bit more bass. I like a little bit warmer, fuller vocals. And even though I appreciate it, I think I could do with less top-end information and sacrifice for those additional things like bass response and a little bit more present vocals. But everybody has a different taste, and I tried my best here to describe what type of sound you may prefer. So I think that's going to wrap it up for the HD800S. This is a truly, truly fascinating headphone. I want to send a huge thank you to Nima, the individual who owned this headphone, and our channel sponsor for supporting the show. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. Check out all the links in the description down below. And until the next video, my name is Josh, signing off.